This one scared me just as much as the first time, because again, I never heard a car pull up or anyone walking outside. It had to be the host again, but why? And so soon after he just came over. Immediately, I knew this was odd, and I felt really uncomfortable. I checked my phone, and of course, there was no text or call from him. I slowly walked into the main room, hearing him knock several more times. I wasn't sure if I wanted to answer the door or not, but I ended up just calling out from the other side and asking what he needed. He stopped knocking. "Can you open the door, please? I just wanted to ask you one more thing. I'll be quick, I promise." I didn't respond for a few seconds, because I honestly didn't know what to say. In those few seconds, he must have gotten impatient, because he knocked on the door again and asked if I could open it. I said I was late and I wasn't in the mood, so if there wasn't an emergency, then I'd like to be left alone. He took a long time to answer after that. The silence was really eerie. Once it reached a whole minute, it was even more so. I didn't hear him walk away, so was he just standing out there? I quietly walked up and looked through the small window on the door. He wasn't out there. I immediately thought that he must have snuck away, because surely I would have heard his footsteps on the gravel if he just walked away. But then, where was he? I didn't know what to do. I felt really uncomfortable and didn't know why he was acting so strange. I stood there by the door for a minute and listened for anything. Honestly, I was scared to move. But then, I happened to glance over at one of the windows in the living room. I saw his eyes staring into mine. I panicked and sprinted to the bedroom, where I called 911. While I waited, I heard what sounded like him trying to lift open the window, which was terrifying, but also odd considering he had to have had a key to his own house. But that's when I figured it all out. That man wasn't the host. This was confirmed when police arrived. He'd already run off. We have no idea in which direction. But we got in contact with the actual host and owner of the cabin. I don't know what that man's intentions were that night. Obviously, he was lying and clearly plotting something, but I'm just glad I didn't open the door. It was spring break. I was 18, and this year my family took a trip to a small cabin out in Minnesota. It was just me, my mom, and my younger brother who was only 7 at the time. We were planned to stay at this cabin for the whole week, and part of the reason we were going to Minnesota was to check out some of the smaller towns and scout for a place we might want to move to in the future. Anyway, the cabin my mom booked we had never been to before, and I don't think she knew how far out it was from the closest towns. She was probably more concerned on the price. It was really far north, and about 35 minutes out from any shopping areas. I guess it was a good test at how good we'd handle the rural life though. The drive there was a little over 10 hours. I drove the first few hours, and my mom drove the rest. We got to the cabin at sunset. It was really pretty, the orange skies setting over the dense forest and wildlife. Way different than the skyscrapers and massive office buildings we were used to. The cabin itself was noticeably old, however. Everything creaked, and it didn't look like the place was professionally built. It was fine though. I mean, it was a cabin after all. We settled in for the night, testing out the wood-burning fireplace and just resting after the long drive. I ended up napping for most of the evening. My mom went to bed around 8:30, but because I took a long nap, I stayed up a bit later. My little brother was also in his room, so it was just me hanging out in the cabin. I sat by the fireplace on my phone for a bit, then thought I'd get some fresh air and check out the back porch. It was a really small wooden deck with a sketchy looking fire pit in the middle and a few chairs around it. I sat down and looked out into the forest. The night was really quiet. No cars or busy streets, just the occasional bird crowing in the distance and the trees rustling in the wind. I loved it. Being further up north, though, it was a bit more chilly than I expected. I spotted some logs stacked up on the side of the cabin and figured I'd give the fire pit a try. I lit it up no problem, and the fire stayed well maintained in the center, so I guess it wasn't as sketchy as I thought. Anyway, I sat by it for a while. I never get to do this sort of thing, so I just soaked it all in. After about 30 minutes of being outside, there was a very sudden and just completely out of nowhere sound from within the forest. Honestly, I had no clue what it could have been, but I did think that the way it sounded and echoed through the trees was kind of like an axe chopping into a tree or wood. It was only one sound though, and I didn't think it was really possible for anyone to be out here near us. It was pitch black out there, so I couldn't see anything, but whatever it was, it sounded pretty close. As I stayed out there for the next 5 minutes after hearing the sound, I felt my nerves building up a little bit. Just this uneasy feeling that ruined the peacefulness from before. I ended up snuffing out the fire pit and heading back into the cabin. From the sounds of it, my mom and brother were asleep already. I still wasn't all that tired though. I don't know if it was still from the long nap, or maybe the sound I heard waking me up, but I still didn't really feel like going to bed yet. I stayed up in the living room on my phone. I had some movies downloaded, so I didn't have to worry about Wi-Fi. Only 15 or so minutes in, I heard something. I paused the movie and listened. I wasn't sure if it was the cabin creaking from someone waking up or walking around in their room, or maybe just wind hitting the walls. It gave me that uneasy feeling again though. I wasn't used to being in this kind of environment, so I think that's why I got so easily unnerved. It was only a minute later that I heard it again though. This time it was from the opposite end of the cabin, not where the bedrooms were. It was from outside the wall, just next to me. The only thing there was a window. I leaned a little closer and listened. Just when I thought I might be hearing something, a loud sequence of knocks shook the front door. It vibrated across the wooden walls. I froze up for a moment, then heard my mom get out of bed and hurry into the hallway, asking what that was. I was standing up at this point, knowing something was wrong, but told her someone was at the door. I could tell she was pretty frightened too. She immediately went back to get her phone and call 911 because there was no reason for anyone to be banging on our cabin door in the middle of nowhere and in the middle of the night. As she did, I walked up to the door and looked out the peephole. It was extremely dark. There were no porch lights or anything, but I could see the basic figure of a man standing fairly close, just staring ahead at the door. And in the dark, I could see the outline of a heavy wooden axe in his hand. I felt my eyes widen and nerves spiking. Everything rushed through my mind. I tried to think of any reason this wasn't what it looked like maybe he needed help or was lost, or I don't know. Nothing seemed to explain this as being anything but bad. The man banged on the door several more times as my mom was on the phone with an operator. They never spoke though, stating any excuse for them being here. They just aggressively knocked on the door. In the heat of the moment, it was hard to tell how much time passed. It felt like forever though. But then he did what we were all terrified of. One loud crack slammed into the door, and the slightest bit of the metal axe pierced through the wood. At that point, we all ran into the farthest room and locked ourselves in. We heard more hits against the door, but only 4 or 5 before they stopped. We weren't sure if he'd busted the door down already, or if he had given up, but we just waited. It took just under 15 minutes for the first officer to arrive to the cabin, which was honestly quick